There are defenders who want to win the ball. There are defenders who want to hurt you. And then there is Pepe. If you value your legs, you don't just check the tactics board before the match, you check your life insurance. To understand the terror, we have to go back to the night the monster was officially unleashed. April 21st, 2009, the Santiago Bernabeu, Real Madrid against Getafe. In the 87th minute, Getafe's captain Javi Casquero breaks into the box. He goes down under a push. The referee blows the whistle for a penalty. In 99% of football matches, the defender puts his hands on his head, argues his case, and walks away. But Kepler Laveran de Lima Ferreira, known to the world as Pepe, did not walk away. What happened next remains one of the most disturbing sequences in La Liga history. As Casquero lay on the grass, Pepe didn't see an opponent. He saw a target. He snapped. He unleashed two violent kicks at the prone man, one raking across his shins, the other striking his back. He then walked over him, pressed his knee into the turf, and punched Juan Albin in the face. The stadium went silent. The commentators were gasping for air. As the Spanish press wrote the next morning, in football there are tough players and there are crazy players. But on that night, Pepe wasn't a crazy player. He looked more like a criminal than a footballer. That night earned him a 10-match ban, but it gave him something much more powerful, a reputation. From that moment on, the Butcher of Madrid was born. The image became iconic. The shaved head, the veins popping out of his neck, the eyes, those wide, bulging eyes that seemed to stare right through your soul, devoid of any empathy. He didn't look like a modern athlete. He looked like an executioner. Opposing fans called him the assassin. The media called him the animal. Rumors started to spread through the dressing rooms of Europe. The word was that Pepe didn't step onto the pitch to play football. He stepped onto the pitch to hunt. He was the chaotic element that no tactic could account for. When strikers saw his name on the team sheet, they felt a very specific kind of fear. It wasn't the fear of losing the match. It was the primal physical fear of pain. They believed that if they tried to humiliate him with a skill, or if they held onto the ball for a second too long, Pepe wouldn't just take the ball. He would take their ankles with it. For the next decade, Pepe became the villain of world football. But as we are about to find out, the violence was only the tip of the iceberg. The reason strikers were truly terrified of him wasn't just because he was crazy. It was because he had a partner in crime. If facing Pepe was a nightmare, then facing Real Madrid's defense between 2010 and 2015 was pure, unadulterated hell. Because the terrifying truth was this: the monster wasn't alone. To truly understand the gravity of the fear Pepe projected, you have to look at the man standing next to him, Sergio Ramos. Together they formed the dark duo of European football. If Ramos was the hot-headed general, the alpha male who commanded the line, then Pepe was the chaotic enforcer, the man sent to do the dirty work. They created a defensive partnership that didn't just rely on positioning, it relied on intimidation. It was the ultimate good cop, bad cop routine, except there was no good cop. There were just two bad cops waiting to smash you. Their dynamic was predatory. They hunted in pairs. When a striker received the ball, Pepe would often be the one to fly out of the defensive line, aggressive and reckless, trying to snap into the tackle. If you somehow managed to dodge Pepe's assault, you had no time to celebrate because Ramos would be waiting right behind him to finish the job. This created a psychological effect known as striker's hesitation. Forwards would receive the ball and for a split second they would freeze. They would look up to see which one of the two was coming to kill them. And in elite football, that split second of hesitation is all it takes to lose the ball. They built a wall of anxiety that very few could climb. But this reputation for organized violence didn't just happen by accident. It was weaponized during the most intense era in Spanish football history, the Mourinho years. When Jose Mourinho arrived in Madrid in 2010, he found himself in a war against Pep Guardiola's Barcelona, arguably the greatest club side in history. Barcelona played with art, with rhythm, with tiki-taka. Mourinho realized he couldn't outdance them, so he decided to beat them up. And Pepe became his primary weapon of mass destruction. During those infamous El Clásico matches, Pepe was often moved out of the defense and deployed as a defensive midfielder. His instructions were simple: do not let them play. Specifically, do not let Lionel Messi breathe. The footage from this era is brutal to watch. We saw Pepe headbutt Cesc Fabregas, we saw him grab opponents by the throat, and most infamously, we saw the moment Lionel Messi was sitting on the turf and Pepe, walking past, looked down and deliberately stomped on the Argentine's hand. The world was outraged. They called it anti-football. They called it a disgrace. But from a psychological perspective, Pepe was doing exactly what was asked of him. Real Madrid needed a monster to stop the beauty of Barcelona. They needed someone willing to turn a football match into a street fight to disrupt Barca's flow. Pepe looked at the hatred coming from the stands, he looked at the cameras, and he accepted the role. He became the villain so that Real Madrid could survive. He wasn't just tackling players, he was tackling the very spirit of the opponent. He was sending a message that if you wanted to play beautiful football at the Bernabeu, you were going to have to pay for it in blood. However, if you think Pepe was just a mindless thug who kicked people because he lacked talent, you are falling for the biggest trick he ever pulled, because behind the violence there was a secret that made him even more dangerous. Now here is the plot twist. Here is the moment where the legend of the butcher starts to crumble and the terrifying reality of the athlete begins to emerge. If you looked at the memes, the YouTube compilations, and the headlines, you would assume that Pepe spent half his career sitting in the locker room serving suspensions. You would assume he was a reckless liability who couldn't tackle without breaking a bone. But let's look at the cold, hard facts. And I warn you, these facts are going to shock you. In his final 5 seasons at Real Madrid, 5 years playing at the absolute highest level, winning Champions League titles, facing the best attackers in the world, do you know how many red cards Pepe received? 0, not 1. In fact, if you dig deeper into the statistics of the 2014 to 2015 season, you find an even more unbelievable truth. Pepe, the so-called animal, received fewer yellow cards than Neymar. He received fewer cards than Luis Suarez. He was statistically cleaner than the attackers who were complaining about him. This creates a paradox. If he wasn't kicking people off the pitch every week, why were strikers still so afraid of him? Gary Lineker, the English legend, once watched a masterclass performance by the Portuguese center-back and tweeted what everyone was secretly thinking: Pepe is actually a world-class defender, if we can just overlook the madness. The true source of fear wasn't his violence. It was his inescapability. Pepe was a freak of nature. In his prime, he possessed a recovery pace that was terrifying for a defender. Real Madrid often played a high line, meaning the defenders stood near the halfway line to compress the pitch. This is a high-risk strategy. If a striker breaks the offside trap, they are usually through on goal. But with Pepe, that rule didn't apply. Strikers would break through thinking they had a one-on-one with the goalkeeper. They would sprint, lungs-burning eyes on the net. And then out of nowhere, a white blur would catch them. Pepe didn't just chase them down. He devoured the ground. He had the speed of a winger and the strength of a heavyweight boxer. Imagine the psychological toll that takes on a striker. You beat the trap, you run your fastest, and he still catches you. It makes you feel helpless. Robert Lewandowski, Alvaro Morata, and many elite forwards have hinted at this in interviews. They describe playing against Pepe not as a physical battle, but as a suffocating experience. Alvaro Morata, who played against him in training and as an opponent, admitted that Pepe was the toughest defender he ever faced. Not because Pepe hurt him, but because Pepe was the shadow. He was intelligent. He knew exactly when to step up, when to drop back, and how to use his body to block off space. He was annoying. He was constantly touching you, pulling your shirt just enough so the referee couldn't see breathing down your neck. The fear changed forms. It went from, I hope he doesn't break my leg, to, I hope I can get just 1 inch of space. Strikers realized that they couldn't run away from him and they couldn't outmuscle him. He was a defensive genius disguised as a brute. The butcher persona was essentially a smokescreen. While you were worrying about his studs, he was using his brain to read your every move. But to truly understand the soul of this player, to understand why he fought so hard, sometimes too hard, we have to strip away the Real Madrid kit. We have to look at the man inside and the journey that turned a gentle boy into a warrior. So we have the butcher, we have the assassin, we have the chaotic force of nature, but if you walk away from the stadium, take off the kit and sit down for a coffee with the man himself, you encounter something that doesn't make sense. You don't find a monster, you find a gentleman. Everyone who has ever shared a dressing room with Pepe says the same thing. The man is unrecognizable off the pitch. He speaks with a soft, quiet voice. He is shy. He is a devoted father who spends his free time playing with his daughters, not sharpening his studs. How can one human being hold 2 such opposing personalities? How can the gentle giant become the mad dog the moment he crosses the white line? The answer lies in his origin. It lies in survival. Pepe arrived in Portugal from Brazil as a teenager alone with barely any money in his pocket. He wasn't playing football for glory. He was playing to survive. He knew the feeling of having nothing, and that fear created a fire inside him that never went out. For Pepe, the striker running at him wasn't just an opponent in a game. That striker represented a threat to his livelihood. That striker was trying to take the food off his table. His mentality was simple and brutal. If I don't stop him, he kills my dream, and I will not let my dream die. The violence wasn't malice. It was a desperate, aggressive form of protection. And nothing proves this protector mentality more than the greatest night of his life, the Euro 2016 final. This was supposed to be Cristiano Ronaldo's night, but just 25 minutes into the game against France, tragedy struck. Ronaldo went down. He was crying, broken, carried off on a stretcher. The captain was gone. The talisman was gone. Portugal should have collapsed. But they didn't, because the butcher stepped up. In that moment, Pepe stopped being the chaotic sidekick. He became the general. He looked at his frightened teammates and he carried them. For 120 grueling minutes, Pepe was everywhere. He won every header. He blocked every shot. He threw his body in front of the ball as if it were a grenade. When the final whistle blew and Portugal were champions, Pepe didn't celebrate immediately. He collapsed. He literally vomited on the pitch from pure physical exhaustion. He had emptied his entire soul for his country. He was named man of the match not because he hurt anyone, but because he saved everyone. That was the turning point. That was the redemption arc. As he aged, the crazy boy slowly transformed into the wise man. Look at him at FC Porto. Look at him at Euro 2024. At 41 years old, when most defenders are retired or playing in lower leagues, Pepe was still starting in the Champions League. The wild tackles disappeared, the red cards vanished, but the dominance remained. He replaced his youthful aggression with experience. He didn't need to kick you anymore because he already knew where you were going to pass the ball 3 seconds before you did. This brings us to the core truth of Kepler Lavarán de Lima Ferreira. Pepe is not a butcher who loves violence. He never was. He is a warrior who loves his team. He is a man who realized early on that the world is a harsh place, and sometimes to protect the things you love, your goal, your teammates, your dreams, you have to become a monster. He wore the mask of the devil so that his team could walk in heaven. And that is a sacrifice that only a true legend can make. When we finally close the book on the career of Kepler Lavarán de Lima Ferreira, we are left with a strange, conflicting emotion. 10 years ago, if you asked a neutral football fan about Pepe, they would have called him a disgrace to the sport. They hated him. But today, as he hangs up his boots, that hatred has transformed into something else. It has turned into a deep, reluctant respect. We watched him evolve before our very eyes. We saw the skinhead maniac who kicked players on the ground turn into the curly-haired calm sage who guided Porto and Portugal through the fire. He proved that a player can change his methods without losing his fire. He proved that you can kill the monster without killing the warrior. In an era of football that is becoming increasingly sanitized, where players are media-trained robots who are friends with everyone, Pepe remains a relic of a different time, a time when loyalty meant war. So here is the final verdict on the man. You can hate Pepe, you can call him the butcher, you can call him a criminal, but if Pepe is wearing your colors, if he is standing in your defensive line, you will love him more than any player on earth. Why? Because when the entire world turns its back on you and when the odds are stacked against you, Pepe is the only man who will stand in front of you, shield you from the danger, look the enemy in the eye and say, "You'll have to go over my dead body." Subscribe for more untold football stories. I'll see you in the next one.